Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Karen Smith, positive psychology practitioner and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Micah Nyhouse, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. And with that, let's get started. Hi all, and thanks for joining us again today. Our guest today is Sophie Scott, an award-winning journalist, keynote speaker, and mental health advocate who has dedicated her career to improving lives through evidence-based information and storytelling. Sophie is best known for her role as the ABC's national medical reporter, where she covered groundbreaking stories in health and science for more than 2 decades. Her work has earned her numerous accolades, including a really prestigious award, the Eureka Award for medical journalism, and she is widely respected for her ability to make complex topics accessible and engaging. Beyond journalism, Sophie is a passionate advocate for mental health and wellbeing. She's delivered TED Talks, written extensively on the topic, and has authored 2 highly acclaimed books, including Live a Longer Life and Roadtesting Happiness, and 1 digital book, Beat High Functioning Anxiety Now, 10 science-backed strategies to transform your life. Sophie's insights are grounded in both research and personal experience, making her voice one of authenticity and impact in this space. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Yeah, my pleasure. Look, thank you for that beautiful introduction, and I'm so honoured to be on your podcast. I love the work that you and Micah are doing to talk about positive psychology, and particularly to talk about the not just the shiny, happy stuff all the time, but you know, the journey and the struggles that people don't often talk about, which I think is really important as well.
Yeah, so excited to have you on the show. And, you know, you, as Mike and I were planning out the show and looking at season 2, we were really excited when we were going through the guest list, and we both said, yep, Sophie's definitely somebody that we'd love to have on because you're quite open about this. And this is one of the things that we really love. Like, we wanted to create this podcast to normalise some of these conversations. And to be honest, it feels like you've been doing it for much longer than what we have, like a couple of decades longer than what we have. But we thought you'd be a great person to have on the show. And with that in mind, we'd love to know, like, where does this passion come from? Like, what inspired you to sort of enter into this field and sort of dedicate? You really have dedicated your career to this space. So we'd love to hear a little bit of behind the scenes and what got you here.
Yeah, sure. So, look, I think I was always one of those kids that had my head stuck in books when I was growing up. And I was really always fascinated, like I'm sure lots of people listening had the same sort of experience as a child, like being fascinated by people's stories and, you know, wanting to understand what makes someone tick. And so that really is what drew me to journalism, because journalism, you get a really privileged and unique opportunity to meet people and find out about them and ask them questions. And it was a fascinating career, and being able to pair that with, you know, doing sort of evidence-based stories and science and health and meeting amazing patients and doctors and just being able to walk alongside patients on their journeys and have them share their experiences with me was a real privilege. And I think that was something that I never took that for granted, that people were so open in sharing their, you know, what had often been a very challenging experience for them, but that they were happy to talk about it because it was going to be able to, by sharing their experience, it could help someone else. And so I think when it came to my own life and my own, you know, what I'm passionate about, which is focusing on your well-being and the daily habits that you can embed that will help you really feel amazing, I wanted to be able to share to people what I'd been through, because, you know, for 25 years I'd been asking other people what they'd been through. So I really wanted to then say, you know, it's okay, life can be challenging, you know, even though despite what social media might look like, we all go through struggles, we all go through difficulties. And that's what I want to say to the person listening, that, you know, we need to look a little bit further than just that bright, shiny social media facade that a lot of people think is the reality of people's lives, and recognize that if you're going through a challenge, chances are, someone else is as well. And that's where we can learn and grow from each other, by sharing our insight, our journeys, and, by sharing what's worked for us, then we can help someone else to feel better.
Oh, I couldn't have said any more perfect than that, because that is obviously exactly the mission we have behind this podcast, Sophie. So thank you so very much for opening with that. Now, as Karen read out in the beginning, your career is nothing short of astonishing. You've published books, you've won awards, given TED Talks. It's amazing. And I've been following you for a while, both on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I'm such a fan of the content you share. It's so practical always. It's hard to believe always when you see someone like yourself, Sophie, to believe that there's struggle behind this. I would love to know if you're happy to share maybe some of the challenges you've experienced along your journey. I know you've transitioned at some stage into self-employment as well. I don't know, I feel like so many of our guests, and including ourselves, and sorry, Karen, if I'm speaking on behalf of you as well, we feel sometimes like we're not good enough, we'll never make it, sometimes hopeless, whatever. Do you ever experience any of this, or have you ever experienced any of this?
Yeah, so look, definitely. And I think the biggest point for me was when I went through a period of burnout myself, which I didn't actually even recognize was burnout at the time. And so when I was talking to a doctor that I knew, and he was actually looking for someone to include in a book that he was writing about burnout. And so he went through the list of symptoms of burnout, and he talked about things like the physical and emotional exhaustion, the feeling disillusioned and disengaged, and feeling like you're not doing a good job and you're not really making a difference. And when he went through all those symptoms, it was like this light bulb moment. I sat there and it was just like ding, 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 and all the boxes were being ticked. And I really, even though I knew, I was working really hard, as a full-time TV reporter, and I was also flying around the country doing events, and I had 4 kids at home at the time. And I think, we just keep going physically, and particularly if you're someone who tends to spend a lot of time in your head, you just keep cognitively, you just keep thinking, I've always done this, I can always keep doing it. But I think what happens with burnout is that gradually creeps up on you. And then you start to realize, and I certainly started to realize, and people listening, you might recognize this too, that all of a sudden you realize that the whole weekend you haven't stopped, and you've been thinking about work the whole weekend, and you haven't taken any time to do anything that was restful or relaxing or restorative. And then even on holidays and taking breaks, I was still always thinking about my work and my job, and that being in that constant state with your nervous system in that fight or flight. And that starts to show up for you physically, and it certainly did for me. And that's where, for me, that was the moment where I realized that something had to change. When I started to get all the physical symptoms of burnout, that was, my heart was pounding all the time, and I was having all these periods of dizziness, and I couldn't, I had that cognitive load where I just couldn't think straight, because when you're going through burnout, your prefrontal cortex stops working properly, and you can't have that executive function and planning that we really need. And so for me, the realization was when the physical things started to kick in, that I just can't keep going anymore. And so often, I love that phrase about the body often tells us, and that often keeps score about things. And so for me, it was that sense, my body telling me something has to give here. You can't just keep doing this like you've always been doing. And I knew that I needed to make some really significant changes to get back to feeling much more like I was flourishing. I love the concept of living a flourishing life. And when you're in burnout, you're in the other end of the spectrum. And so I had to really think about my life and my day, and rebuild my nervous system so that I could do the work that I wanted to do, because I didn't want to leave the job that I loved. And that's, some people in burnout feel like they have no choice but to leave. But this was just before the pandemic, so I didn't want to leave, and I was really loving my work. And so I had to really think about what other habits, what other practices that are going to make me able to cope with this stress, because, as you both know, stress is not going away anytime soon, but it's how we manage it. It's the rituals and the habits and the routines and those protective factors that we can put into place and embed, so that we can cope with whatever life throws at us. And so I was able to look at the research and look at what could make a difference and be able to build my health back up to the point that I could stay doing the job that I loved. And I did that throughout the pandemic, which was full on, you can imagine, as it was for so many people. And then I decided to transition that I love positive psychology. I love the concept of flourishing and emotional well-being and all the science behind it. And then I decided, I want to be able to share my journey with more people and to really focus on just creating content and going out and giving talks and posting lots of stuff on social media. And the big thing that I noticed was that I was just getting so many people saying to me, I love your LinkedIn post, or I love that Instagram on what you're talking about and about the research into self-care and why it matters. And I realized that I needed to hear all this research for my own well-being, and so did so many people said to me, this is what I needed to hear to make that change in my life so that I can really feel like I'm flourishing again. And like the work that both of you do, to be able to help people like that is so rewarding.
Absolutely, and I love the path that you're leading us down here, Sophie, because for many of our listeners in our previous episodes we've had focuses on, battling loneliness and imposter syndrome and that self-doubt, but we haven't had a really good conversation around burnout, I would say, and really looking after ourselves. We've had some conversations around self-kindness and self-compassion, but I think your work really takes it to a whole another level. And one of the things that we love about your work is this ability to convey, fairly complex topics into really easy, understandable language for the layperson to be able to understand and engage with. And I want to do a little shout out here to Micah just on your notion. You were saying, you can work through the whole weekend and just be caught up in work. Micah actually tagged me in a post on the weekend asking me what I was doing for fun. Because I think she knew that I was probably going to be working. But it's nice. It's probably a nice little thing to have people in your corner that are looking out for you. But I'm curious to know, what were the strategies? You've spoken here about your own personal struggles and realization around, I'm experiencing burnout. What were the things that you did? What were the changes that you made in your life that for our listeners, they can listen to and go, that's me. I could maybe give that a go.
So one of the challenges with burnout is that you're so depleted that you feel like, oh my God, now she's going to rattle off this whole list of things that I need to do, and I don't really feel I can do any of it. So you need to start as small as possible and think about the things that are going to make the biggest difference are the things that regulate your nervous system. So that's things like, doing some deep breathing and some meditation in the mornings. And even though, look, I had written in my previous books about meditation, but I never did it myself. And it was only when I really got to that point where I looked at the research to what is actually going to make a difference to get you feeling better, that I realized that having a deep breathing practice is one of the best things you can do for your nervous system. And being able to embed things as habits so that you don't need to rely on motivation, because, motivation comes and goes, it waxes and wanes depending on how you're feeling on any given day, and so you can't rely on that. So I really looked into behavior change and what is going to make these habits stick with me, and so that I could then teach other people how to do it. So I love the concept of habit stacking, for example, where you think about, like for me, the first thing I do when I wake up would be to have a cup of tea. So for me, that was like, okay, that's got to be the time when I think about doing a short meditation, because I know I'm going to have that tea every morning. And so why don't I pair the meditation with that cup of tea? And then all of a sudden, you're not thinking, I need to make time to meditate, because you've already carved out 5 or 10 minutes to have that first cup of tea or whatever it is that you have in the morning. So I think those little things like that is what made a difference. Starting to think about things that can regulate your nervous system, that can, the whatever movement you're up to doing, in people who are very burnt out and depleted, you've got to start really slowly. But, I was able to, when I was feeling really burnt out, I could barely walk. There's a beach that we go to where it's about 1 kilometre from one end to the other, and I couldn't walk that beach without having to stop and have a break and rest. I was that unwell. And now I've gone from being out from that unwell to now being able to go to the gym most days and lift weights, and so I've had this massive transformation through those small little daily habits. And that's what I think, the mindset shift. You think, doing something small every day, what difference is that going to make? But what I want the person listening to recognize is that's where you actually see the change. By sticking to those small little changes every day, you actually make significant changes to how you feel. And so understanding that was a big shift for me as well.
Beautifully said, and thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. You could barely, move or be well enough to walk that kilometer, because I can see obviously on Instagram, how often you exercise, and that you always, take your dog for a walk along the beautiful beach and so forth. I am curious. You mentioned in the beginning the cognitive overload, and that everything just seems too much and you're overwhelmed. Your prefrontal cortex doesn't really work properly anymore. So logical reasoning and so forth and problem solving, decision making are somewhat inhibited. For our listeners, if people are listening and they recognize themselves in your burnout story, to be honest, when I listen to all the things you do to regulate your nervous system, that even just overwhelms me. I'm thinking, that's not a little thing. That's just not a little step. What advice would you give them in terms of where to start to change things?
So I think that is the thing, to think about what are the smallest actions that you can commit to do on your worst day, or on your busiest day, or on the day when you're feeling the most depleted. That's where you need to start. So it might be literally 5 minutes of meditation. It might be literally just 5 minutes of doing Tai Chi, or 5. So I have the 3 pillars that I really think about is the breathing practice, is movement, and then connection. And so thinking about who can I reach out to for support, and who can I talk to, and who can I who's given me support in the past, or because we know from research just how important the quality of our relationships are, and particularly when you're feeling burnt out, people you can feel very isolated. You feel like you are battling this by yourself. And so leaning into people who've supported you in the past, or who love you and understand you and who get you, has also been something that has been a revelation of just how important that is. And that's something that, since I've been working for myself as well, I've been able to really ramp up that level of connecting with people where you feel you have the same values and you really inspire each other. And, the rewards that you get by making the effort to prioritize connection in your life, it pays off so much. And I would never have realized in the past just how important that sense of connection is. Because I think, I love the work that psychologists do, looking into doing work that matters and feeling like you matter. And often when you're feeling burnt out, you feel like you don't matter anymore. And so thinking about with people that you love and that you feel connected to, you feel like you matter when you're around those people, because they love you and support you, and you love them and support them. And so I think that's why connection is a really key part of recovering from burnout, and also making sure you don't get back to burnout as well. I think you've got to be really committed to these strategies. It's not just like I'm fine now, I'll just go back to the way I was living before. This is actually, these practices, and, the reason I do put it on my social media is almost to just document that I'm committing to this every day. I'm actually walking the walk myself. I'm not just telling other people to do this, but I really believe it. I believe that this is how you can transform your life, your well-being. And this is how, just by taking time for yourself, and particularly if you're someone who, like a lot of us are, tend to put other people's needs first, other people's needs above our own. And after a while, that's when you can end up, having no boundaries and having no time for yourself, and really often paying the price for that. And so I talk a lot about boundaries in my workplace sessions, and really empowering people to think about the quality of the life that they want to have. That, do they want to really wake up every morning with that dread, that feeling in the pit of your stomach that you think, oh my God, I just don't want to go to work today and I feel so anxious and awful? Or do you want to wake up thinking, today's going to be a really good day, and actually telling yourself and thinking about the positive things that you've planned for and that you know you've got something to look forward to. And so you can have more choice than you realize into how you feel, and often it's those daily actions that really make a difference.
And I love in particular that you're highlighting that these are not just short fixes, something you do for a number of weeks or a couple of months, but that you're talking about actual lifestyle change.
It is. And look, it's one of those things that we, look, I knew all of this in the past. And so people might say, well, why didn't you just do it? If you knew it, so lack of knowledge is not a problem. We know what we should be doing to feel well and to feel our best. But it's having that sense of, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel when you wake up? How do you want to feel when you think about your week ahead? If you want to feel vibrant and you want to feel like you're flourishing and you're being the best version of yourself, for yourself, but also for the people that look up to you and that you care about, then these are the things, these habits and these practices will get you to that sense of flourishing. And that's why I think, Micah, that I was so, really love the work that you put out with your focus on flourishing, because for people, if you haven't heard of much about positive psychology, people are like, well, what even is that? But it's feeling like you don't just want that blah sort of languishing feeling. You actually want to make the most of every day and feel as good as you can every day, and really putting the effort into to make that happen, because the quality of our life matters as well as the length of it as well. And so we do have more choice than we think in what the quality of our life can look like. And this is even if you live with chronic illnesses. And so you don't need to, like I've got a couple of chronic illnesses that I live with, and one of the things to do with that is not thinking that you need to wait for everything to be perfect, but actually thinking, how can I make the best of this day with what I'm dealing with and with what's going on for me? So it's not about wanting perfect health and wanting to be, like thinking everything's going to be perfect. It's actually thinking about what's going on in my life right now, and how can I actually be that flourishing, vibrant person for myself, but also for the people that I care about.
That's a beautiful one there. And I'd like to pick your brain a little bit here too, Sophie, because I know that you've got an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I already know that you've shared some of this, but I think for our listeners listening in here, this could be really beneficial. So you've spoken about your 3 pillars: breathing, movement, and connection. And we've spoken about these things previously on the podcast, but I love that you've spoken about this notion of having small actions attached to these. And if I'm sitting here listening, I'm going, and you're right, like the knowledge isn't necessarily the gap, it's the application and the actual doing. But if I'm sitting here listening to what you've said so far, I'm like, okay, well, I can sit down and I could maybe do a meditation with my coffee or tea in the morning. I'm hitting the breathing pillar there. Movement, I know that I should be walking, more. I should go for a walk along the beach or out in the bush or just even around the block. I can see those as very small daily actions that I can interweave into my life as a starting point. I think the connection one is a challenging one for a lot of people. And we know as adults it can be really hard to form new connections. A lot harder as an adult as what it was, in primary school. Have you got any tips? Because, to form daily actions around connection is challenging. And as an adult to go, I want to form or strengthen or reconnect with people can be really challenging. So have you got any tips for people that might be in the midst of a bit of burnout going, I can work on these other 2 pillars. That connection one's a tough one though.
So the thing about connection is thinking about finding people. I call it like finding your tribe. And sometimes you'll find that tribe online, but ideally if you can find it in person, and thinking about, where are you going to be able to find them that you can have, a number of interactions with them to build that connection. Because, we build connection through familiarity, through seeing people that we enjoy their company, and for me one of the most amazing things for me is that I've made some friends in the last 2 years who I would count as now some of my closest friends, which you would think, and that's a really amazing thought, to think that you haven't met all the people in your life who are going to be important for you, that they're out there, and all it takes is to make that effort to put yourself out there and to be a little bit vulnerable and to say, you know, I'm going to actually put myself in situations where I'm going to meet people who like the same things I like, who, you know, might be the same age and enjoy doing the same things. And that can be different for each person. So it might be that you like bushwalking and you find a group of people who go hiking every weekend and you develop relationships and friendships in that group. But the rewards that you get by putting yourself out there and by being able to just be a little bit vulnerable and make that little effort, because connection doesn't just happen as a matter of course necessarily. You know, I think we need to think about the micro connections as well. So not every sense of connection has to be someone who you become deep and meaningful with. It could be just, you know, simply things like that add up throughout your day, so that you're having those series of sort of micro connections with people throughout your day. But I think it's actually, you know, we are living in this society that is, you know, really suffering a lot of loneliness. And the antidote to that is really thinking about, where are the opportunities for me to build that sense of connection, to build that sense of a community and a tribe. If I don't have it in my life right now, where can I find it? And being really intentional with going out and looking for it, and being open to it. Like, so if, you know, one thing I've done over the last 12 months is really trying to keep time, and this is something I can do because I work for myself now, but if someone says, you know, who has the same sort of interests as me, do you want to go out for coffee? In the past, I wouldn't have had the time to do it, and I probably would have thought no. But now I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go and have a coffee with that person, and I'm going to make an effort to build connections with like-minded people. And again, the rewards, and Micah, when you come down to where I live, I want to have a coffee with you, because you're definitely on my connection list. Because, you know, we need to prioritize. When you find people who have the same interests as you, it's almost like you're going to see that they've been through the things that you've been through, and they understand what you've been through, and you understand what they've been through. And, you know, for all the downsides of social media, and it does allow you to connect with people that you would never have had met before. And so if you can find people where you are having similar interests, similar values, and then you can develop those connections as you get older. And it is so worthwhile. And I really do encourage people to think about that as a very important part of the wellbeing puzzle. And often it is overlooked because it does take a bit more effort.
Sophie, I am lapping up every word of what you're saying, and I love that we are talking about this as the conversation slowly comes to an end, because as you would know, research shows very clearly that connection, and deep and honest, vulnerable connection with other people, may as well be the biggest key to happiness and mental and physical health and longevity as well. So absolutely love that, and I agree with you that this is so often underestimated and overlooked. Having said that, when it comes to the pillar of connection, I think what is also overlooked within that is the connection to ourselves. And you said in the beginning, burnout seems to, it tends to creep in so sneakily. And as you would know, with languishing, the absence of mental well-being and the opposite of flourishing, that is a very, very similar scenario. So I want to take a minute to talk about something very exciting that you've got in the works, because it can help people so beautifully to connect with themselves, and not only that, but also to create those lifestyle changes we spoke about earlier. Do you want to share a little bit about what I might be hinting at here?
Thank you. Yes. So I've been one of the things that I've been giving a lot of talks and workshops and talks at conferences, and you know, people love them and they say that was so valuable. And one of the things that they have said is, I would love if there was a way that I could embed these habits that you talk about every day, and have some sort of tool or resource so that I could come back and sort of just check in every day. And so we've developed an interactive online journal called Your Wellbeing Journal. And the idea is that it's going to be something you can save to your phone or save to your computer, where every day you can, depending on how you're feeling, it might be that you want to do a gratitude practice or do some goal setting, or you might be looking at your to-do list thinking it's overwhelming and I need to really pare it back, and there's tools in the journal for that as well. But the idea is that it's really personalized for whatever you need at that moment, but that you're doing it each day, and that repetition and that consistency builds those neural pathways, and it builds those habits, and then you don't have to rely on motivation, because as we said, that will come and go, and before you know it, you'll be doing these habits automatically. And so I'm so excited to be able to launch this journal soon, because I think it will really help people have a tool to say, you know what, I want to do this, I know I need to do it, and this is going to be able to help me stay accountable. And also I wanted to have a way of getting people to think, how do you want to feel when you achieve these goals? And there's a whole lot of boxes that they'll be able to tick. They'll feel proud, successful, like they've accomplished something, like they've really succeeded in reaching a goal that was important to them, because that's what we want. We want the emotion that comes with sticking to our goals and keeping the promises to ourselves. And so this interactive journal, that's the premise of it, to help people really stick to those well-being goals and to feel like they can succeed and that they can flourish, and to see how worthwhile it is and how amazing that they'll feel at the end.
That sounds incredible. I certainly will keep an eye out for that, and I'm sure our listeners will too. What did you say the name was? Your Wellbeing?
It's called Your Wellbeing Journal, and it's going to be released soon.
Amazing.
Oh, super exciting. And I think on my end, I can always do with a little bit of extra accountability. So that's going to be very useful on my end, I'm going to say. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I don't know that I have enough yet.
It makes a difference.
Absolutely, and it's really exciting, and I feel as though it's another nice little gap filler, in the sense that there's that little gap, and I think has huge potential to help a lot of people. So really excited for the launch of that, Sophie. I do have one more question, and it definitely wasn't one of the ones that we sent you prior to the show. And it's a unique one, and I hope you don't mind me throwing it out here, but you've had the opportunity, unlike probably many of our guests, to be able to connect and interview and speak to probably a much greater breadth of people than our previous guests. As a bit of a personal question, but also probably one for our guests, who are maybe one or two really inspirational, amazing people that you've met along your journey that have really inspired you to keep doing the work that you're doing? Or maybe there was like a little catalyst moment that come from a conversation from somebody incredible that you met?
Yeah, so that happy to take questions without notice. And there's two people that come to mind. And one people might think about, and one people will be like, that's out of the left field. So what people don't know about, or what a lot of people don't know about me, is that I lived in America for quite a few years, and I was an entertainment reporter as well before I was doing health. And someone that I got to sit down and interview was Robin Williams, and being able to sit down with him and have an in-depth interview with someone who was such a brilliant comedian and such an amazing personality, it really just showed you when you're in the presence of someone who was a very, very special person and a very special individual. And you could see almost like it was like flicking a switch. When you sat down to interview Robin Williams, a switch was flicked in his brain. He was so funny. He was hysterical. He was making fun of me, of course, because I was the interviewer. And you were just swept up in this creativity, this creative genius that was in front of you. And I just was so inspired by being able to be in the presence of someone like that, and that really inspired me to want to do more and to want to meet people who are amazing like he was. So he was someone who I have never forgotten that interaction. Another person that I think about a lot, and this is just one example of the many patients and the many families who shared their stories with me when I was covering health. I did an interview with a couple who had lost a child to a genetic illness that they didn't realize that they had the gene for this particular condition, and they were very brave in a very, very vulnerable time in their life, deciding to be public about what they'd been through and wanting to change the situation so that other families didn't go through the same thing. And so meeting Rachel and Johnny and hearing about their baby Mackenzie and getting to know them, and the changes that happened in Australia as a result of them sharing their story, the changes so that families now have access to genetic tests so that other families don't go through what their family went through as a result of them sharing their story. So being able to play a small role in that, but really meeting someone and meeting a family like that where they could have just decided to, sit with their grief and process it, and that would be it. And that's nothing wrong with that. But instead they decided, we don't want other families to go through this, and how can we turn our grief into something to help other people? And they did, and they really did. And I was able to go with them on part of that journey. And so I think that also inspires me as well to think about being able to have played a role in what they succeeded in doing, which was really improving the situation for families in Australia who now have access to genetic testing that they've never had before as a result of Rachel and Johnny sharing their story. So yeah, they're just two examples of amazing, very different people, but who both made a huge impact on the worlds that they inhabited. And it just shows that no matter whether you're a Hollywood star or just a family, that you can have a positive impact on the world. And it's how you choose to show up, and it's how you choose to deal with what life throws at you that really makes a difference.
And beautiful reflections. Thank you for sharing, and thank you also for doing the nice little wrap up where we need to summarize the key take homes of those two stories there. I love that part, that no matter who we are, we all have opportunities to sort of make someone's day, make someone's life that little bit better, and yeah, it's a nice little point there just to sort of consider as we come to a bit of a wrap on the conversation. Sophie, it's been a really beautiful conversation. We've really enjoyed the time, and I'm sure for many of our listeners, if they haven't had a chance to connect with you already and your work, there's a few avenues in which they can do that. Do you want to sort of run us through maybe where some of the best channels to be able to connect with you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff on my website, which is just sophiescott.com. And I share a lot on Instagram. So my Instagram is just Sophie Scott and the number 2. And I've got a YouTube channel. The website's probably a good start though, because I do post a lot of content there, and I have an email list. So if anyone wants to join the email list, I always put anything I'm developing, like the journal, for example, it goes out to the email list first, because I really value the fact if people hand their email over, I respect that, and I share material with them that I don't share anywhere else. So I would love people to go to the website and sign up, and I promise that I won't bombard them with information, but it'll be worthwhile, and I'd love them to see the journal and give me feedback, and hopefully it can help them build those healthy habits that we all want. We all know we should do, but it's being consistent that makes that big difference.
I have no doubt in the world whatsoever that your email list receives a lot of value from you. Sophie, it's been such an honor to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for your vulnerability, for your openness, for the stories you shared. I feel enriched and inspired to get back into my work today, that's for sure, and also to look after myself a bit more and to connect with others. So thank you so very much. We will make sure we link to your website and all your socials in the show notes. It was an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah and Karen.
All right, back in the post show again, Micah. Oh gosh, I love this episode with Sophie. Some really amazing insights, and what a journey she's had. What a career.
I know, amazing career, so impressive. I loved about everything she spoke about. It aligned so well also to my own background in public health and the work around lifestyle changes and stuff like that I've done. So everything she spoke about really resonated with me. Can I just say that something that really stood out to me was that when she spoke about burnout, she constantly highlighted the importance of connection. How good was that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that too, and I probed a bit about this one because I was really curious. I'd done some reading recently about this, and I pulled up the article as we were talking, but there wasn't enough time to interweave it into the conversation. But I read this really great article. It was called the journal article from the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. It's called the Connection Prescription. And it was lovely. It was talking about how in the US they had this amazing campaign, quite some time ago now, that was based around exercise as medicine, encouraging like general practitioners to write exercise into wellbeing plans to support people. But there's a bit of a shift, and this paper sort of highlights the need for connection is medicine. And we've spoken about connection before. We had some beautiful conversations. I think back to Claire Goodrich, way back in early in our at the start of our podcast, we were talking about that notion of loneliness, and you can't flourish alone. She really highlighted this, and we could link this back to theory. We could look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We could look at self-determination theory around that part of relatedness. So crucial, right? It's there's a good reason why it's coming up again and again.
Oh, 100%. But also, Karen, you can't just drop self-determination theory and relatedness here. You might want to explain a little bit what self-determination theory is actually about and how relatedness fits in there. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but
no, that's fine. So it's beautiful. Actually, I've recorded some videos recently about self-determination, a little EduLearn series. So Edward Dici, Richard Bryan, wanted to look beyond sort of what motivates us and helps us to understand. It's almost like that drive. Daniel Pink's got some very easy to understand work in this space, but they looked at it and they sort of identified that there was three things that we need in order to sort of they were basic human needs. So we need to experience relatedness, which we mentioned. It's that's that connection part. It's us being a part of community and feeling as though we're supported. There's competence, and it's feeling as though we're recognized for our efforts, and we can believe that we can do good work. And then the last part is autonomy. There's some pretty clear evidence out there now around the importance of teaching even kids autonomy from an early age. It's do you want the red spoon or the blue spoon? It doesn't matter. It's just a spoon. But giving, people that autonomy is such an important piece in helping us feel as though we have some control over where we're at and what we're doing.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's just so interesting, and I think it's so good that you bring this up, because that element of relatedness, we know, so self-determination theory being about, what motivates us, and especially how can we increase that external motivation. So often we're aiming for goals that we're not intrinsically motivated for, for example, exercising more, but we don't really like, the whole idea of going for a run or going to the gym. So this is, something that we're only externally motivated for, but we somehow have to maximize that external motivation. And if we optimize our level of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, we know that we can, through that, maximize our external motivation to a point where it almost feels intrinsically motivating. And that relatedness part is so strong. Can you do it together with someone else? Can you do it for someone else? Can you support someone through doing the activity? I'm so fascinated by that research.
Oh, and I love it too. And it's amazing because you can look at it from the lens of myself, where does this exist for myself in the way I live my life, but also within the workplace as well. Or if I'm leading 100%. A group of people, I should be fostering these things as well. These 100%. Needs, I shouldn't say things, they are important, human needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved that throughout our conversation with Sophie, you brought up something that, to be honest, I've never heard about before, and that's the Waffle Wednesday, which is also all about connection. I just want to prompt you a little bit to talk about that more. Do you mind sharing a bit more about when you've come across that, since when you've been practicing it?
Yeah, and I can't remember if we actually spoke about it within the episode or just straight after the episode with Sophie. But yeah, so it is amazing. I was, I'm not going to say doom scrolling. I feel as though I'm pretty good at avoiding doom scrolling, but I was just scrolling through my Instagram one night, and it just come up this video, and this guy starts talking. He's like, "Hey, I've just, started doing this new thing with my mates. It's called Waffle Wednesday. This is how it works." Anyway, I sort of listened to the video, and the basic premises of it is that, we want to strengthen or re-strengthen connections that we have with people that are important to us. And you send a short video of yourself just talking about what's happening in your life, just waffling for a short amount of time. Anyways, so I've been doing this now with a few friends.
For how long, if you don't mind me asking?
Probably, like a couple of months now.
Okay.
And yeah, definitely a couple of months. And it's been really amazing because, I've got like some amazing childhood friends that, we all moved away to different cities, and, we don't really get to catch up in person too much, and conversation sort of dwindles and then, peaks and troughs. But, these people are really important to me, and I can go like months without really knowing what's happening in their lives. So every Wednesday I have an alarm set in my phone for 6 o'clock. So, I'm sort of walking out of gym at that time to then jump in the car and shoot off some videos to friends. Now I've got like a group chat with a couple of people in it. I've got a couple of individual ones. I'm about to move from Waffle Wednesdays to Friday Faff because I need another day. But it's been kind of good because like we've set in each of these, we've set a time limit of 2 minutes. So it's not a huge time commitment. We just get in and we just chat about, what's happening in our lives, what we're working on. And it's actually been really beautiful. And as a follow-up to that recently, like one of my mates who, such a great mate, and in our Wednesday Waffles, we're often talking about things that are annoying us or things that are going okay. But he just like shot me a text message out of the blue and he said, "Can I give you a quick call?" And I was like, "Yeah, no worries. Like, we don't normally call." Anyway, he just wanted to get on the phone and just tell me about the fact that, he's got a little girl that's only 8 months old. And he's like, "I just wanted to like let you know that we've been working on her sleep routine and we've been trying a few different things and they're starting to work. And I just needed someone to know about it. And I wanted to let you know." And it sort of caught me off guard. I was like, "Oh, how lovely. How lovely to celebrate that." But completely missed it. It caught me off guard and I was like, "Oh, this is beautiful though. Absolutely beautiful."
Oh, I absolutely love that. And you said earlier, just 2 minutes. Sometimes it just takes 2 minutes. And this is exactly what Sophie spoke about as well. Is that those sustainable lifestyle changes, not just aiming for adding something massive to your life, but being able to fit it in. And if it takes 2 minutes, you really don't have an excuse not to do it, do you? And she also spoke in that context about breathing exercises and stuff like that. Sometimes in terms of, in order to calm down and beat burnout or just find a moment of respite, even doing something as little as just taking a deep breath in and out or doing some breathing exercises. I don't know. That's just another thing that stood out to me. I just thought was so helpful because it's those tiny changes, micro changes that really have changed my life.
Absolutely. And I think, there's some positive framing that can be done in this space too, right? Like, you don't have to sit down and do a 15-minute guided meditation. You might do a 1 minute, like, quick reset meditation, right? And there's a awesome, like, little cognitive reframe here because I know some people go, "Oh, why would you do a minute? Like, what a waste of time." Or why would I go to the gym and just do one workout, like work out for 15 minutes? I normally go in there for an hour. I wouldn't do 15 minutes. But it's like, how about looking at it from the lens of going, I've done something good for my body. 15 minutes is better than no minutes, or 1 minute of like intentional breathing is better than no minutes of intentional breathing.
100%. Some is better than none.
Yeah, this episode for me was a big one around self-care and looking for those signs of burnout and trying to avoid being, caught in the mud. What are the micro things that we can be doing, the micro actions that we can take, because they don't have to all be big. That was a nice little takeaway for me in this episode.
Oh, 100%. Sophie was full of all the gold and wisdom. Loved it.
Absolutely, and you expect nothing less for someone who's dedicated their life to this space and their work to this space. So another beautiful episode with plenty of like affirming little tidbits of advice and pearls of wisdom in there. So, and people haven't already, definitely worth following Sophie on socials. She's like almost daily putting out these lovely little pearls of wisdom that just give you a little bit of feel good. So yeah, definitely check that out. But Michael, another great interview. So thank you for your time and some really insightful post-show conversations here. Hopefully our listeners got lots out of it once again. Hopefully people have enjoyed the start to this season and get excited because we've got some amazing guests lined up. Some real, like some local to Australia, some big international ones as well. Some very exciting ones in the mix. So stay tuned. Yeah, we can't wait. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's show. We hope our conversation helped normalize the struggles so many of us face on the path to success. While on the outside things often look like sunshine and rainbows, this is rarely the experience for anyone behind the facade.
But instead of letting that demotivate you, we hope it does the exact opposite. To let it fuel you to keep pursuing your purpose and realise your potential. Just without the added burden of feeling inadequate, and a little more patience, some tips, and self-compassion instead. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.